The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in Part B of House Report number 116-383, offered by Mr. King of Iowa.
Pursuant to House Resolution 811, the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment, in reading through the bill, brings something forward that we've experienced a number of times in the natural disasters that have poured forth in the flooding in my district over the 17 years plus that I've represented the folks in the Missouri River bottom in particular, but it also affects everybody around the country. And in reading the base bill, it says that the 3-month grace period that's granted for a student loan begins on the date that the declaration of disaster is issued. And often that declaration of disaster is issued sometimes months after the disaster is over. And so is the crisis over for the student, former student who is paying their student loans and having difficulty meeting those obligations because they've been the victim of a natural disaster, whether it be a hurricane, whether it be a flood, whether it be a tornado, or some other type of natural disaster. And I see an earthquake down across from Florida, across the Caribbean this morning. So what this amendment does is it moves that date back to the date of the initial date of the disaster itself, rather than the date that it's been declared a disaster. And so the language that says in the current bill says date on which the major disaster or emergency was declared instead becomes initial date of the incident period of the major disaster or emergency. And Mr. Chairman, I'd point out that some of these dates along the way that stand out to me. There was flooding in North Dakota that began on October 9th of 2019 and continued until October 26th of 2019. And that disaster was declared not then, but clear till January 21st of 2020. That would have been the first date that the grace period would kick in under this language, and I ask that grace period kick in immediately, although the announcement will come from FEMA and wouldn't be on the first day of the disaster, but that's the first day that they feel the financial stress. I could go through a number of these. Hornick, Iowa, the courageous people of Hornick bounced back from that flood as strongly as anybody I have seen, but that began on March 12th, and the disaster declaration came March 23rd, so they lost some of those days. And I'd look down to Tropical Storm Michael in North Carolina, and that disaster began October 10th to 12th in 2018, and 4 months later, January 31st, 2019, was the declaration. So the credit of these people that are trying diligently to pay their student loans is damaged unless they have this grace period that begins when the stress period begins, and that's what my amendment does, Mr. Chairman, and I'd reserve the balance of my time.
From Iowa Reserves, for what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
To claim the time in opposition, although I'm not opposed.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment will allow for more time for private student loan borrowers and the process of rehabilitating their loans to repay their loans when also impacted by geographical or disaster and our emergencies. By changing the language from when a disaster or emergency is federally declared to when the actual disaster begins, private student loan borrower would have more time outside of when an emergency is officially federally declared to explain and have their situation taken into consideration for hardship. For example, it was a shame that it took President Trump more than 2 weeks to declare the major disaster declaration after Puerto Rico received a string of earthquakes beginning in December the 28th. Consumers should not be personalized by politics when they are in a dire need for help. As climate change and other disasters continue to have devastating consequences across this country, students who are demonstrating that they can rehabilitate their loans and improve their credit scores should not have additionally suffer because of extreme events like these cause hardships that would reasonably interrupt a payment. It can take years for communities to recover from natural and other disasters. And this amendment further allows victims of these disasters the time that they deserve a fair chance to improve their credit scores and further credit opportunities. I support this amendment and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Iowa is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I inquire as to how much time remains.
2.25 minutes.
And for the other gentleman?
3 minutes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I yield myself so much time as I may consume. And
Without objection.
I appreciate the gentleman's remarks with regard to this amendment, and I would point out that we have 435 members in this United States Congress, and it was envisioned by our founding fathers that we would get ideas from every one of those districts. And they also recognize that we're all human, and no matter how diligent we might be, no matter how much we care about the people that we are helping, sometimes things just kind of slide along, looks good on its surface, and we're busy. And so that's why we all want to look at this, and that's why I have the privilege to be here to offer this amendment. And having gone through natural disaster after natural disaster after natural disaster, suffered from them myself. In fact, the 1993 flood is probably why I'm in this Congress today, because I realized that the degree of risk was not proportional to the potential for profit if you're underwater. And so I want to help those students that want to keep their credit in line, and I appreciate the support across this Congress to do so, and I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Iowa reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the balance of the time. I urge all
Without objection.
Okay, I urge all my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Iowa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the gentleman's remarks again, and I would just point out that of this list of disasters that we have and the delays we have in these disasters, there's one here that on April 29th, a disaster declaration was declared for severe storms and flooding within the Sac and Fox tribe in the Mississippi and Iowa. And and I actually live in Sac County, although that's not part of that reservation, with an incident period spanning March 13th till April 1st. However, the disaster declaration was April 29th, so there was a month and a half delay in that one. I have other examples of this, Mr. Chairman, but I think that we have made our point here today, and I appreciate the attention and diligence of the members on both sides of the aisle, and I would urge adoption of my amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Iowa. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.